Hey y'all, it's Rick here with Uncommon Communion. Happy Wednesday afternoon. Let's begin this time that we have together as we begin all of these times, remembering, recalling, embracing the reality that we are always and everywhere in the holy presence of God and each other. Well, I hope that where you are today is a day that you're having a little more sunshine than are having here in Central Ohio. And I mention that because on an overcast day like this, it is perhaps a little bit odd to talk about radiance. And I'm talking about that today because in my prayer in the book that one of the books that I read each morning for my prayer, this is the Meister Eckhart book, and I will put a link to it in the message or the writing piece, the post for this. Put a link to it. It is wonderful poetry, prayer, mystical writing by this Meister Eckhart, who you might know. In many ways, he kind of reminds me, his words remind me of the Arabic poet Rumi, the Sufi poet, Sufi mystic. And I want to share with you the words that I came across today. And I'm going to do this in two parts. I want to share the first part of it, stopping about 2/3 of the way through. So I'm not going to read the whole piece. It's short, don't worry. And then after some reflection, I will come back and end with the entire piece so that you can hear what the poet, the mystic, has to say in his entirety. So here is what he says. He says, "In times of doubt, I forget that you are not a God of thoughts, to be found in concepts or theories, but are the source of my life and the radiance that shines forth in all that is." And I'm going to pause there. There is a little more, but that's where I'm going to stop right here. So I love that idea of radiance. And it can be something literal, perhaps. I am recalling the transfiguration of Christ, right? Where Christ is on the mountain and he brings his three of his apostle friends, and they see him radiant with this great white light. That, of course, is echoed many centuries later, a couple millennia later, in the writings of the great American 20th century mystic Thomas Merton, as he talks about being in Louisville and seeing people, the passersby, radiant with the light that is shining forth from them. I am thinking about radiance today and God being light that shines forth from us in a less literal way, not a literal light, pouring out of us, a glow or a halo or an aura. Rather, what happens when we share from our heart, or even in my case, as I'm going to share with you here, from my gut, which is even lower. And I think that is really where God is to be experienced. And I think that's what Eckhart is on about here, right? He says God is not in the head. God is not something that we can, God's not a formula. God's not a theory or a thesis or, something that is intellectual. There's certainly a lot of intellectual pursuits of theology and all of the ologies that are related to that, Christology, soteriology, and so forth, right? And that has its place, no doubt. I'm not being critical of that. That said, our head and our thoughts can only take us so far. There is, I would argue, a lower place in us, which is our heart, right? The ancients talked about our heart being the place where our will and our desire and our passion came from, or comes from, flows forth from, right? We often think of heart as something squishy and soft, not the literal heart, which is, I guess, squishy and soft. What I mean is heart as in like feelings, right? And that's not the case, at least not in the ancient sense of it. Heart is the will, the desire, the choice that we make to desire the good, to desire the good for another. That is what love means. So the heart, again, I would argue God is there. God is in, we talk about loving God with our whole heart and our whole mind and so forth. I know from my experience, there's an even deeper place and a much more challenging place for me to access, and that is my gut, right? And for me, the gut is where intuition lies, where the ability to sense beyond sense lies. And especially for me, it is where my true self lies, right? Underneath all of the artifices of my thoughts and my emotions lies this center. And for me, accessing that truth, speaking from that truth is challenging. And quite honestly, it's only something that I am learning little by slowly, as you might say, through 12-step work that I'm doing, through writing and thinking about my spiritual journey, and in this church group that I attend on Tuesday nights and I was with last night. And a little bit about that, I've shared, I think, in writing about this. It's called Whole Heart Tuesday. And it is at a coffee shop, a local coffee shop, a nice family-owned coffee shop called The Family Room, and just a very neat place. And it's wonderful that they allow us to meet there on Tuesdays. And it's kind of an informal gathering. It's a bit of a book study, not a scripture study, more of, we've been talking about poems and stories and so forth. Last night, I felt really moved by the topic and shared from my gut something about my life that I don't talk about much with others. And I will maybe talk about more in a video, or perhaps especially when I write my faith journey, my story, because this is a big part of it. It is a fear, a deep fear, and really a phobic fear that I have. And last night, I felt moved and trusting enough to share this with the handful of people who were around the table. And for me, this was a really big deal because it physically involves my gut. It is has to do with emotions and worries and anxiety and so forth. And even when I talk about it, even when I'm talking about it right now, I can feel it in my gut. And I know that part of that feeling is a defense mechanism. You know, I grew up not trusting the environment that I was in, not learning how to share authentically about feelings, especially difficult feelings. And that's part of it, that physical sensation that I feel in my gut, even as I share right now. I know also that it is a feeling for me that I am sharing something true and something real and something that isn't just intellectual, not something that's just, an emotion, emoting. It is something that is real and true and foundational and fundamental for my life and for my experience. And I was so grateful that I could do that last night with this Whole Heart Tuesday group. And it's remarkable for me because, as I mentioned, I work 12-step programs. And I am learning in those groups, in those rooms, to be able to again share my story, my struggles, my journey, my experience, strength, and hope, as they say in those circles. And I haven't really been able to do that much in church groups. I did once many years ago, a men's group that I was only a part of for a very short time before my wife and I relocated out of that area, and haven't experienced that since. And it's wonderful to be experiencing that again, to know that within the context of a faith community, a church community, I can be real and I can have a place where others can be real. Because again, I believe that when we share from our gut, it opens up a space which invites others to similarly share, right? And that's what happened last night when I shared about this form of OCD. Someone else in the group shared also. And it was very reassuring for me to hear someone else has had a struggle that is different than mine. It took a different form and yet similar in the way that it shaped and colored this person's life. And I felt connected. And I think in the end, and this is where I will end with a full reading of the Meister Eckhart words. And I think that is the nature of reality, is connection. All is connected, all is linked, all can be traced back to a source, which is creator, whatever that may be, or however that may be, there is a source. And I think anytime that I am recognizing and realizing and living from and within that sense of connection, I am experiencing and living within God. I think Eckhart gets on to that. And again, I will read this and conclude. In times of doubt, I forget that you are not a God of thoughts to be found in concepts or theories, but are the source of my life and the radiance that shines forth in all that is. And then I remember, mine is the work of learning to see you as the radiance that shines forth in all that is, even in the dark, even in me. And I am grateful for the whole heart, which maybe I would call it for me, the whole gut Tuesday group, and for the ability to learn how that even sharing some of my darkest parts, my deepest fears, in doing that, I can recognize the radiance that is God within me and share that radiance through my trusting, through my honesty with others. Thank you all again for joining. Please share this. Please subscribe if you have not done so. And more than anything else, be well.